I've traveled the world, and I've seen firsthand what happens to entire societies when government officials, drunk on power, forsake their own people.
There's the dump. The place full of lies, full of people who cannot afford to live in town.
This is Ngozi Mine. On the outskirts of Bulawayo, this municipal dump is home to some hundreds of Zimbabweans left destitute to live in shanties made of corrugated sheets of compressed asbestos. How did they get here? You see, back in 1980, Rhodesia got its independence from the Brits, Zimbabwe was formed, and Marxist-Leninist comrade Robert Mugabe took power.
I, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, do swear that I will be faithful.
Zimbabwe was supposed to have a democratically elected president every few years, but that didn't happen. Instead, in the mid-80s, the country went through a tribal civil war between the Shona and the Ndebele called the Gukurahundi. Some 30,000 Ndebele were massacred by the Zimbabwe National Army.
As a boy, he herded cattle and grew to resent the white man who owned the land of Rhodesia. Zimbabwe's productive commercial farms were still largely in white hands. When white farmers started to fund a new opposition party, he called on veterans of the Liberation War and their followers to seize the land by whatever means.
With close to 70% of Zimbabwe's working population depending on agriculture, you can see how detrimental mass land seizure and commandeering businesses can be to an economy. Predictably, the country stopped producing, businesses forced to close caused a mass exodus of agrarian, manufacturing, and textile industries. The country stopped exporting food and commodities, and whole industries died. Fast forward 3 decades.
Decline was matched by wanton destruction. In 2005, Mugabe had the houses of urban dwellers bulldozed because most supported his opponents. In subsequent elections, thousands of opposition supporters were beaten and tortured, including the late opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai. Poverty, deprivation, hyperinflation, and queues for basic goods came to characterize the country.
The first day I set foot in Zimbabwe in 2008, $1 traded for 870 million Zimbabwean dollars. The next day, that same US dollar traded for 1.5 billion. My money lost half its value overnight.
According to newly released figures for the month of July, the country's annual inflation rate hit 231 million%, a rise from 11.2 million% reported last month.
They're saying there's no cash in the bank.
Zimbabwe isn't working.
There are queues everywhere, in the supermarkets when there is food available, for fuel at filling stations, and more recently, people have queued, often in vain, to draw cash from the banks.
As the Zimbabwean government frantically tried to keep up by printing more money in higher denominations. This is a $100 million note. This is a $500 million note. This is a $5 billion note. This is a $25 billion note. This is a $100 billion note. This is what a $50 trillion note looks like. Yes, believe it or not, this is real money. By the time this currency went out of circulation, it could barely buy you a loaf of bread. This is King George VI School, a boarding school for disabled kids in Bulawayo, struggling to buy bulk food and supplies.
Zimbabwe's economy remains in freefall. The government keeps on printing more money in higher denominations. Now the economy is blighted by hyperinflation and joblessness.
I thought you said 2 trillion. Right, so that's it. Yes? Now what do you need for your soap? 9,980,000. That's 10 trillion.
You know what? I asked God to make me a billionaire. Instead of that, God made me a trillionaire.
No, it's Sam, what was the figure for the soap again? 9 trillion?
To call somebody, it costs $200 million. To text a message is $40 million.
Whoa.
So to have enough airtime, you need something like 100 billion in your phone, which is somebody's salary for a month.
160 billion plus 9,980 billion. It's too much. We haven't got enough.
I think people will be moving around with wheelbarrows, carrying some money with wheelbarrows, going to buy a loaf of bread.
All right, so we'll go with the porridge, and so we can halve the soap powder. Sam, your 9,980,980. Can you divide it by 2?
The best mathematicians in the world, Zimbabweans.
I'm confused. No. We have to start the whole thing over again.
In 2008, teachers at this school got paid the equivalent of $20 per month. But they got paid in Zimbabwean dollars, and because of hyperinflation, their pay lost half its value every single day, even while they're teaching, so they had to spend it immediately. The inflation was so bad that many supermarkets had to have full-time price gunners updating the price of goods multiple times per day to keep up with the inflation. That's if they even had anything to sell that day.
The shop is TM, and these days they call it empty. Look here.
Life is a constant struggle to find basic necessities, but it hasn't always been like this. Zimbabwe was once viewed as Southern Africa's breadbasket.
I like this one actually. It says, warning, shoplifters will be apprehended and prosecuted. Oh my God! I think we need to steal here. It's so full. The people oh my God!
For Mugabe, the well-being of his people came second to ideology and power.
Zimbabweans had to deal with a food shortage, with endless empty store shelves, a fuel shortage, rolling 16-hour blackouts from an outdated electric grid that couldn't handle the swelling population, and a sewer system with water pipes that hadn't been maintained since the Rhodesian days pre-1980. And, naturally, along comes cholera, killing some hundreds of Zimbabweans per day.
The health facilities in Zimbabwe lack drugs and doctors.
A man died and went to hell. Then he went to the devil and asked how much it was to make a phone call to the USA. And the devil said, to call to America, it's about $2. Then how much it was to call to South Africa? To South Africa, it's 15 rands. Then he said, how much is it to call to Zimbabwe? And the devil said, it's cheap. To make a call to Zimbabwe is something like 5 cents because it's local, hell to hell.
In the end, the opposition caved to the inevitable. They were allowed into office as long as the old man remained on top. He'd once said he had degrees in violence and that only God could remove him from office.
Comrade Robert Mugabe, intent on staying in power by any means necessary, shut down businesses, seized farms, centralized resources, rigged elections, consolidated power, paid off cronies,
to the deepening of cooperation between Zimbabwe and China,
cozied up to other communist dictators, used police and military to terrorize citizens into submission, commandeered the means of production, and drove a once thriving country into political and economic turmoil. Some of this sound familiar? You might scoff at this and think you're safe, thousands of miles away here in America. But if you think for half a second that this can't happen to America, you're in for a rude awakening.